You talked about partnering or funding organizations, self-interest. How do you define your self-interest? Is having a position or an opinion the same as having a self-interest?
Well, I think there's actually two separate things, and you just hit at both of them that our working group flagged. The notion of self-interest most commonly surfaces in the private sector. A business that has an interest in its business that somehow might be advanced, although as we know increasingly, nonprofit business is a significant portion of the American economy. So there's the organizational self-interest around their own business, their service, their profit, whatever, and that's one set of concerns. The other is an agenda. And one of the questions that we've wrestled with, I think Ted actually posed it, said, are all agendas a bad thing? And the answer, most of us don't think so. But the question is whose agenda and how are we presenting it is the issue. We need to be mindful of actually both of those things. Almost every funder comes with an agenda, that's why they're giving money away. So the notion is to be clear and transparent about what that is. Ask and make sure it aligns with your purpose, your mission, and what you're doing. And to make sure you share that with your audience as you do what you do. I think is where we're coming down.
Does the public perceive a difference, as we do, between news and non-news programming, and thus should there be separate standards for news and non-news, or should they all be the same since they're all on our stations?
I think in some of what I was referring to in the one group, the Dave Iverson-led group, looking at news in general, is you asked whether the public, and I think they do within reason, and I think that the recommendations are sort of taking into account that when you're actually reporting news, there is one set of expectations. It could be somewhat different than working with a local orchestra, for example, or working on even history programs, although I think there you sometimes get into variations. That's where I think how much of a difference is going to depend on your community and your station. So you tell me, do you see a difference? Which community are you in?
Urbana, Illinois.
And have you had to wrestle with this issue at all?
Yeah, occasionally. So, I know what a newscast is.
I know what a newscast is. I know what a news feature is, a 5-minute news feature. I also hear the news department involved in other kinds of programming from time to time. You were talking about University of Wisconsin, so it's the Wisconsin Public Broadcasting, putting on debates a news program in the public's mind.
I think the advice of our working group in this area hit right on the way we ought to go about answering these questions, which is in the mind of the audience, not in the mind of ourselves. If you listen to what Ted was reviewing there, the recommendations, so many of them came down to if a reasonable person, if an average person would perceive a conflict of interest, if a reasonable person, an average person would hear something wrong, probably good to stay away from it. And I think in the same notion, however we might slice it, if this is news and this is sort of non-news information programming and whatever, what would the reasonable person and the average person hear it as? Is that news or is it music? Those kinds of levels of distinction probably are a better way to make the right decisions in parsing these things out.
I want to thank the committee for this work. It's really important work. And our board just recently discussed this last month. And one of our most vocal supporters actually was our state public librarian. And she talked about how this is very standard in public library community. I'm wondering if the working group has had communication with the public library community and if that's in the works, because I think we can learn a lot from that public entity as well.
I'm not aware that they have, but that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, we've not, so that's terrific.
Colin Powers, Mountain Lake PBS. As a director of production, I find myself in position frequently of my producers, whether in-house or independents I'm working with, saying back to me when there's a perception issue with one of the funders. Well, I never spoke with a funder. You know, they had no editorial control whatsoever. You know, we treated it as a firewall. I wondered if your group had talked about ways internally to establish some sort of, I don't know, ombudsman type office or distinction or some way to allow a station to prove to those questioning that there's been some sort of firewall, there's been some sort of distinction between the editorial side and the funding side. Because really the reality is out there, as most of us know in the room, very frequently you've got a close alignment of interest between topic matter and the funders you're going to approach, and this comes up over and over and over. So I'm wondering, that perception test gets real dicey. Can we find ways to kind of firewall it?
It's a really great question, because we sometimes, I believe, get a little hung up on this perception and become either gun shy in any funding, you know, or we just don't deal with it straightforwardly. But you're saying, I mean, Tom mentioned, I said it before, that often funders are ones who do care about the issues. That's why they're giving you funding for the particular project. So what kind of insurances, I want to make sure you keep the mic because I'm not dead, but what kind of insurances do you have internally? What kind of safeguards to ensure that if a public perception, you know, needs to be addressed, that you can do that with confidence? Is that the
I mean, this is only going to get harder for us. I guess is one thing, just to be clear. I was at a meeting the other day about funding the future of public television, and had some people experienced in corporate giving and foundation giving. And the person talking about corporate support said that no one's surprised in the room. Well, of course, the notion that corporate support of what we're doing is a contribution is like so dead. This is driven by the bottom line is like advertising and exposure and whatever. And we kind of wisely nodded to that. But then the person kind of from the foundation side said, "You think it's any different in the foundation community?" This is a person of one of the leading foundations in America, and a generous supporter of public broadcasting. He said, "What our foundation is doing these days is first we've got to say, what's our agenda? And then we find who's doing our agenda. And it's not just us. That's the way this stuff, more and more, is on the foundation side as well. So that's what's ahead of us. And increasingly it'll be the perception of that from any source that we're receiving is that there's an agenda behind it. I think the notion that how we can communicate a firewall is extraordinarily difficult. It's right here. See that firewall? I mean, how do you actually do that? So that's why the tilt towards transparency, I believe, is the current pathway of what people are seeing, where maybe some answers in this space. Because you just lay it out. You say, here's where the money came from, here's what it was given for, here's what we promised, and we're doing the best we can. And if you can't do that, and hold your head up and say, we're proud of what we're doing and working with these people, then you probably made the wrong decision in the first place to make the proposal or take the prize.
Just to add quickly, because I did go through some different kind of questions to ask when you get into that situation. And I think internally asking the right questions takes you, I think, to a point as to whether or not this is truly a problem or not. I mean, are there demands being made that affect the editorial content? Are there requests that, say, a representative of that firm be included, or a foundation or whatever be included in the program? I think we can put together, there's nothing that's going to be just add this and you're going to get the right answer. But I think we as a system can have questions that we ask, and then based on those answers, you make that determination, and should be able to do that, again, with complete transparency.
It's critical that you have these discussions at the staff level, not just at senior management. Because it's the marketing people, it's the development people, and it's the producers that are on the front lines of this issue. And if your staff doesn't fully understand your policy and doesn't fully support your policy, you'll find yourself in a constant state of damage control, where marketing has to explain to an underwriter, or where the producers have to explain to a potential funder. And you never want to find yourself in damage control. You always want to make sure that your funders, your potential funders know up front. And if your staff doesn't know, they're not going to be able to communicate it to those potential funders.
We're looking actually at ways to go in both directions from management on this, both up to governing boards on that side and then into the frontline staff as well. It's a tricky thing, how to manage that. Everybody's got a lot of stuff on their agenda. It's easy for this to go, I'll get to that later. But it's one of the questions we're confronting wrestling with. How do we, as we get this stuff kind of coming into place and with some sense of finality around it, then engage far more broadly throughout our organizations.
Hi, I'm David Feingold. I'm the head of content at NET, that's Nebraska. I'm also, for full disclosure, a member of one of the working groups, the one on funding and firewalls.
We didn't get the visuals from you.
I want to thank you for bringing Dave Iverson back to the group. The important thing I really want to point out is not all the intricacies of the discussions, but we actually, it's a significant thing going on. We have radio and television working together. And we've talked about that for quite a long time in the editorial space. And I think now more than ever, as we know with the general state of play over public media, the work of this combined task force is critical. Tying it up quickly, and then being able to publicize the work and having the institutions of public media subscribe to it and support it and communicate it among their stakeholders and their supporters is also critical. So thank you guys for your leadership. It was great to work on that working group, but I would also hope that we can accelerate the process and get that word out, because I think it will help support our arguments for continued support across the country.
Thank you.
I think we're about to wrap up to get back on schedule. Are we okay? So as I was mentioning before, we're going to, after the break, do a few breakout groups.
You keep going upstairs.
Okay, I'm following Skip because he is my leader.
Actually, just pause for a moment. We didn't really fully acknowledge Skip's role in all that. When you put partnerships like this together with the Affinity Group Coalition, Station Resource Group, CDB funding, steering committees, and working groups, and so forth, somebody's got to be the glue to make it happen. And we're deeply appreciative of the role that NETA has played in doing just that. They're our funding agent, they're our convener of calls, they're our keeper of records, and they're the occasional jabber in the ribs to say that something ought to happen. So I want to thank both Skip personally and the NETA staff for the support they provided throughout this.
After break, we're going to have breakout groups around two particular subjects. One is this whole issue of transparency. It can be a little slippery to get your hands on. And we're going to try to have you think about it in the groups. Think also about what you don't want to be transparent about. We used some different examples in this presentation, and I really appreciate that, by and large, they came from stations that were participating in our discussion, and they were honestly trying to deal with some complex situations. So think about areas that you think we maybe don't want to be so transparent, areas where you think we can start to kind of make this more real about how we would do it, and play off some of the suggested recommendations that I read out. We're also going to try to look at some situations that might be similar in your area to what Nebraska faced around the funding of the beef steak program or the Wisconsin situation, different creative ways that you may have worked with funding that maybe worked for you, maybe didn't, that we could look at as some case studies. So we're going to do both of those after.
Thanks.